First want to say welcome. I'm Mary Brenton Helsley for anyone that I haven't had the pleasure to meet. But I'm just acting as the host here today. And we want to say for those of you who have been to previous What Matters to Me talks, welcome back. And for those of you who might be new, I'm sorry, I'm totally walking around on Sherry. I forget that there's a piece of this. I'm not supposed to do this. But for those of you who are new, what this is just a short, it's short talks that are given by folks that are within our campus community about what matters to them and what are the things that might make them get up in the morning, what are they passionate about. And sometimes the beautiful thing about this is you get to learn new things about folks. Sometimes you get the chance to be vulnerable with a colleague. And so how do we honor that in spaces like this? And so I hope you enjoy the talks today. That we have two speakers. They don't necessarily plan them together. So you might find your own personal correlations between their talks, or you might just learn something new in general. So. For the format, so first we're going to have speaker one come up and talk, and I will introduce Ivan here in just a second. And so he's going to come up and speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll take a short break while we do a mic change for all our colleagues that couldn't make it here today. We're recording. And so we'll do a quick mic change. You can get another snack, hang out, talk to a neighbor, and then we'll bring up our second presenter. And then at the very end, we'll have them both come back up, and if you have any questions, we'll have time for you to answer those, or ask and answer those as well. All right. Okay, well first, we have Ivan Loy, who is a mathematics faculty on campus. And today he is going to talk to us about, do I really want to know that?
And I broke her wireless mic, so she's got me tied up here, so I have to sit.
It's the magnetism, I guess.
So, my topic, do I really want to know that? And I'm going to start out just telling you a short little story, and any correlation between the little boy in the story and someone you know may actually be, because it is. So what I want you to do, though, as I tell this story, I want you to pay very close attention to your feelings, how you feel about that little boy as I tell the story, okay? And what's going on in the little boy's life. Okay, so we'll see if this wants to work. There we go. A long time ago in a small town in Nebraska, a little boy entered this world. Oh, come on. It's supposed to work. I may just have to do this. Nope. There we go. The little boy grew up on a farm with his mom, his dad, and his big sister. The little boy loved being around the animals on the farm. He was so happy when he got to go to school, especially when they got to do math. In the first grade, his teacher asked him to help a new little girl catch up in math. How you get behind in first grade in math, I'm not sure. While she taught the rest of the class. The little boy discovered he liked to teach. When he was 10, the little boy's family moved into a new house on another farm. This meant he had to go to school in another school, and it was a 2-room schoolhouse. His class was the biggest class in the whole school. There were 6 in his class. Most of them had 2 or 3. When he reached his freshman year, he had to go to the big town. There were 650 people in the big town. There were 43 students just in his class alone. Again, it was the biggest class in the school. The little boy started to realize he wasn't quite like the rest of the kids in his school. He often got picked on and bullied. The little boy felt safest when he went to church, so he went every Sunday. While he was in high school, he became the piano player for the church, and he was the church pianist. Math and music made him feel safe. The little boy went to college and became a math teacher. After graduating from college, he got his first job in a little tiny rural high school that had 40 students, 9 through 12. He loved teaching at this high school but he still realized he was different from everyone else. He kept being asked, "When are you going to get married?" How could he tell them he liked boys instead of girls? The little boy soon found out the people at his church didn't like him liking boys. He also found out that a lot of the boys that liked other boys didn't like him liking church. Many years later, the little boy met a boy he really liked. He was surprised to find out that other boy was a preacher. He doesn't look like that anymore. The little boy and the preacher have been together now for 25 years. Okay? How did you feel as you were listening to that story? I'm sure you had different feelings at different moments. They went up and down a little bit. Somewhere along the line, you might have started to become just a little uncomfortable with the little boy. And maybe, probably for most of you, it was when you learned that he liked math. Okay? Possibly. Or maybe for some of you, it was when you heard he liked other boys. And maybe for some of you, it was when you found out he liked church. Okay? It could have been at any of those moments. And there were others in there too. Possibly when you found out he went to that big school with 650 people in the town, of all things. Okay? Well, we have a philosophy of inclusion that we've worked a long time on here at Front Range. A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, literally, went into creating that philosophy of inclusion. And for some people, I'm sure it was an exercise to meet a goal that the college had of being able to say they were more inclusive and to get through accreditation. And for other people, it was because they really wanted to get something out of that philosophy of inclusion. So our philosophy says at Front Range Community College, we are a community that works and learns together, side by side, embracing our differences, deeply respected and free to be fully known, so that we may learn and grow to reach our full potential. So that's what we've adopted. When this statement first came out, we were having a lot of workshops and meetings where we discussed it. And I remember one college-wide meeting in particular. And the draft at that time, the piece that here where it says deeply respected and free to be fully known, at that time just said fully respected and fully known. And in the group that I was sitting at, there were several people, some mid-level leaders from another campus actually sitting at my table, and they objected very strongly to those words. They didn't like it saying fully respected and fully known. So we talked about that for a little while, and what I found out from them was that their concern was that maybe not everyone wants to be fully known. And I get that. But as we went on with that discussion, I talked to them about how being a gay man is an essential part of my life, and it's who I am. And I needed it to be able to be known about me. And then one of them spoke up, and she said, "I really didn't need to know that about you. In fact, I was happier not knowing." And then we had a short little break, and they moved to another table. And so that's when I realized that it wasn't about being fully respected and fully known, because what does it take for someone to be fully known? It means someone else has to fully know. And what their issue was, well, part of their issue was that they were wanting to protect someone who didn't want to be fully known. But I think a bigger part of it was they really didn't want to have to fully know. They were much happier not having to fully know. Oops. Stop that. So, I then went to another workshop. And there was a speaker at that workshop who was of Asian descent. And she was leading the workshop, and at the beginning she had folks talk about their feelings on diversity. And I remember 2 or 3 of them standing up, and they were really into this workshop, and they very proudly let everyone know that when they met a new person, they didn't see color. And I thought, good, that's probably good. The Asian woman who was presenting spoke up and said, if you don't see color, you don't see me. And I thought that was so powerful for me. Because when they didn't see color, they were denying her the privilege of being fully known in all of her being, everything that made her who she was. And her color was part of who she was, and they needed to be able to see that. We usually don't like to talk about the differences, and whatever those differences are. It's just easier if we don't talk about it, right? And I remember years ago, lots of my aunts and uncles saying, we just don't talk about it. Okay? And it was much easier if we didn't talk about it. Whatever it is, though, is something that needs to be fully embraced because it's what makes us the unique person that we are. And so we each need to bring what our differences are to this big smorgasbord that we have that makes up our community. So I want to ask you, are you ready to fully know? Because I think that's much more important than being fully known. Thank you.
Okay, please feel free as we go to pop up and get more snacks if you didn't get a chance to get some. I'd like to introduce Bonnie Bailey, who is one of our Pathways advisors here on campus. And
let's hear it for Pathways advisors.
She apparently comes with an entourage. So there you go. She's going to be talking about finding meaning and purpose, my life and work in West Africa. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you all for being here. I appreciate it very much. You know, when I was asked to give, and thank you, Andrea, for asking me to talk about this because it's my favorite subject. And when I was asked to talk today, I thought, what do I want to talk about? Because they left it wide open, and I thought, I want to talk about what I did in West Africa because it was so meaningful to me and such a huge impact on my life. So I hope I can share that with you today. So here we go. When I thought about what I wanted to say, I kept coming back to this quote. And I have this on my dry erase board in my office. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. And this inspired me to do this talk today. So I want you to keep that in mind as I talk about what happened with me in West Africa. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Finding my gifts, growing up in Ivan, the state of Nebraska. We talk about the small town in Nebraska, 420 people in my hometown, and it was on the sign forever. That never changed. There were 17 people in my high school graduating class. So I was born and raised in the state of Nebraska, and I lived there most of my adult life until about age 33, right in here. I moved to Texas, down here at the tip of Texas. I was there about 9 years. Then I moved to northern Colorado, and I was actually in Fort Collins for 5 years. Then I was in Littleton for 2 years. Then I moved to Albuquerque in New Mexico, and I was there 7 years. After that, I went to West Africa for 2 years. And now I'm back in northern Colorado. So the history of this, and I'll try to make it short because this is really long, you guys, I'm warning you. I couldn't quit putting slides in here. But the history is, when I was in Nebraska and I was a small child, maybe about 5th grade, I decided I was destined to be an actress. I love getting up in front of people. I love public speaking. I did that through high school and college. I majored in speech and theater. I was going to be on Broadway. I was convinced. Then reality set in when I graduated, and I was a little afraid of my own shadow. And I liked security, so I didn't do anything with that. I eventually got married a couple years later. I had 2 kids. We lived in Nebraska. I put all of my dreams on the back burner. I didn't even think about it anymore. I was raising kids, and I was helping my husband pursue his career. That's how we ended up in South Texas. Now, unfortunately, within a year and a half of moving to South Texas, we went through a divorce. I realized I need a career. I got to do something. I've got 2 kids to raise. So I got into education. I actually had majored in education in college as an insurance policy. I never wanted to teach. I did it very begrudgingly. I was in public school for 1 semester. I said I will dig ditches before I come back to public school. I fell into a job at a community college. I found out I loved working with adults. And I actually started to like teaching. And I found out I was pretty good at it. Oh, no, it sounds like I'm bragging, but it's the truth. I'm a good teacher. And so I was there. Then I decided I got to get out of Texas. And I'm going to die, and they're going to bury me under a mesquite tree. God forbid. So I left Texas and went to Colorado without a job. I struggled for most of the 7 years I was in Colorado. For 2 of those, the last 2 years, I had a full-time job, finally, in Arapahoe Community College. I was teaching there. But I got bored very easily. I have to have, the grass doesn't grow long under my feet. And I had to have more of a challenge. That's why I went to New Mexico. And I went to a much bigger school, and I was able to do a lot of more things that I really enjoyed, like curriculum development and teacher training. And I got to do online teaching, and then I taught people how to teach online. And I was fulfilled professionally. But after 7 years, and that's about how long I last anywhere. I thought, I need a change. I got to have a change. So I was looking for new ways to use my gifts. I wanted something better, something bigger. And a friend of mine had participated in this program with the State Department. It places English language fellows, those are people with master's degrees in TESOL, around the world teaching English and fostering diplomacy. So I investigated this program, and they have about 120 to 140 positions projects every year. And it's very competitive, probably 500 applications a year. I applied. I thought, I have a very good chance of getting this because I haven't been doing a lot of TESOL. But eventually, I got a phone interview, and then I was told that my resume was going to be sent to the embassy in Ouagadougou. Repeat that for me. Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. And my response was, well, where in the world is Burkina Faso? I had no clue what continent it was on. I never heard of it. Have you heard of it? Okay, well, there you go. I wasn't alone. So I got out a world map, and I found out it's right there. You see it? That little yellow spot. That's where Burkina Faso is. It's a Francophone country. It had been a French colony. They speak French there. Do I speak French? No. I'd even forgotten I took French in high school. And I could never speak it. I never could speak it. I still can't speak it. I'm working on it. But that's where Burkina Faso is. Now, a little bit about Burkina Faso will give you a better look. It's that red spot right there in West Africa. It's landlocked. It's completely surrounded by other countries. Here's a map of the country. Mali, Niger, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire, which is Ivory Coast. So that's where it is. What did I know about this country? Pretty much nothing. I knew my resume was going to be sent to the embassy in Ouagadougou. I never heard anything. Months or weeks went by, and I thought, well, they evidently didn't want me. So I thought I didn't get it. I thought I'm stuck in Albuquerque. But eventually, I got an email from the embassy. This is like a month later. Said, we want to interview you. So we set up a phone interview, did a phone interview. The next day, I had an email, congratulations, you're going to Ouagadougou. And this is like the middle of July. I had to be there in September. I owned a house. I had it full of stuff. I went into overdrive. And so I decided, I don't think about things very long. I'm pretty impulsive. And I'm a bit of a risk taker. So I thought, oh, well, what the heck, why not? And I rented my house, and I put all my stuff in storage. And I got my vaccinations, about $700 worth of vaccinations. I got my passport, I got my visa, and off I went. So I was there by September 18th, 19th, something like that. I landed in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. So what did I find out about this country? In the meantime, I'm doing a little research. It's a little over 18 million people in the country. Oh, and by the way, the size of the country, it's about the size of Colorado. Just about geographically the size of Colorado. The life expectancy, as you can see, isn't very long. I kept wondering why I wasn't meeting any men my age. I decided they're all dead. So, I met some young ones, though. So anyway, we won't go into that. It's a former French colony. They used to be called Upper Volta. Have you heard of that before? I remember that from my geography, Upper Volta and Lower Volta, because the Volta River runs through the country. And they were that country until 1960 when they gained their independence as a nation. And they remained Upper Volta until 1983 when this guy, there was a coup, and he became the president. He's a huge hero in Burkina Faso. He was a Marxist, so the United States didn't like him much. The French didn't like him because he wanted to reform the whole country and do something progressive for the country. And eventually, 4 years later, he was assassinated. But he named the country Burkina Faso. Now, where'd that name come from? It comes from two ethnic languages in the country. I can't remember which ones. One's Moray, and I don't remember the other one. And they combined the two words, and it means land of the upright man. And they're very, very proud of their country. The development is horrid. It's one of the poorest and least developed countries in the world. The literacy rate is as bad as the development, maybe worse. In 2008, the UN named it the lowest in the world. Health issues are serious. Water isn't always safe. I never drank any water out of the tap there. I always drank bottled water. There's malaria everywhere. I was on malaria meds the whole time I was there. Many, many people I knew would get malaria. Once you get it, you've got it forever, and it flares up. Yellow fever, you have to have a yellow fever vaccine to even enter the country. Female genital mutilation is outlawed in the country. It's against the law, but it's still practiced by some of the ethnic groups illegally. And then the good thing is right down here. When I was going over there, a friend of mine from Africa said, they're known for their hospitality. Those people are known for their hospitality, and I can attest to that. These were some of the nicest, most generous, most gracious, most welcoming people I have ever met in my life, ever. I have such good friends over there now, such good friends. So I loved that about the country. So what did I learn over there? Well, being a representative of the State Department, I was there to teach English as a foreign language because they're all French speaking or native languages. What I learned was diplomacy, the practice of diplomacy in that country through just living there and interacting with the locals and through teaching English as a foreign language. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I go through. How did I practice diplomacy, okay? And I learned I was good at that too. Dang. I wish I'd known this sooner. I would have applied to the Foreign Service. I loved what I was doing. Okay, so I just want to show you quickly some pictures of where I was at. This, every English language fellow is sponsored by a host institution. And so my host institution was Université Aube Nouvelle. That's French for New Dawn University. I love the name of the university. It's a private university. This is the front of the university. And I was at the American Language Center, which was housed in the university. These two guys right here became my very, very good friends. This is Abubakar, Abu for short. He's the director of the American Language Center. And this is Georges. And Georges was always trying to get me to buy him some chicken. So he said, you owe me a chicken. He was a lot of fun. And then this is Odile and Ida. They worked in the office. They didn't speak a lick of English. And my French was horrid. Somehow we would manage to communicate. But these guys knew English very well. All the teachers at the American Language Center were fluent in English. So thank God. So, and this is where I lived. This house is owned by the university. The president of the university, that's his home, one of the homes he lived in. And he is surrounded by a gate, as most of the homes are there. And this is me on the front porch inside this courtyard. They had this home available for visiting professors. The university offered graduate courses, but they didn't really have anybody in the country qualified to teach them. So he would fly teachers in from all over. So I met professors from Belgium, from Canada, from Benin, from Madagascar. They come and go every 2 or 3 weeks. I was there permanently. They'd come and go. Most of them men. So I like to say, are you there, Maylee? I told Maylee what I was going to say. I'll clean it up. I like to say I lived with a lot of men in Africa. Some quite pleasantly, some I like. This one guy from France, he could go. He was so messy. So anyway, this was the mosque across the street from me. And it's a very small mosque, but the noises I heard, they would call for prayers at 4 a.m. and it'd wake me up. And then this is the well on the corner. That's where a lot of my neighbors got their water. There she is, hauling water. Most of my neighbors didn't have running water. I had it in my house, but most of my neighbors didn't have it. Okay, here's some of my neighbors. This was my next door neighbor, Ishmus. Ishmus and his 2 sons, and I think that might be a grandson. There were people at that place all over. There was a big Muslim family. Lots and lots of wives, lots and lots of children. None of them spoke English. Ishmus and I would wave at each other, and finally he learned to say, hello, how are you? And I'd say, oh, très bien, merci. That was my French. This was the welder next door. He lived on this side of me, there's my gate, and they were always building something and banging around. So there was lots of noise in my neighborhood. Chickens and goats and donkeys, and I got used to it and could sleep through it. So, and this was Isaka, who was probably my favorite neighbor. Mr. Outgoing. I like to call him the mayor of the neighborhood. He was an artisan. He made drums and sold them. He sold jewelry. That's probably his best customer. And he couldn't speak any English either. So, oh dear, what did I do? Shut it off? So this is my neighborhood. I just took some pictures in the hood. So here's Isaka making a drum. This is Isaka's porch, and these guys would show up and play drums. And Isaka was always often out there with them playing drums. And then these kids in the neighborhood, which there were zillions of children, they would show up and dance. It was so fun. Well, if I was in my house and heard the drums, I hightailed it over to Isaka's to watch the crowd. And then this is a big crowd around the well because one day these guys showed up with camels. They came down from the Sahara in the dusty season. And then one of them saw me, came over and brought his camel over, so I had to pay him some money to take his picture. So, so what was life in Ouagadougou like? Well, here's why I talk about diplomacy. I had to learn to be very tolerant of things that are very different, and to be very patient, and not to be that ugly American that demands everything. One of my biggest challenges is my laundry. I didn't have a washing machine. Most people don't have washing machines. There are absolutely no dryers because electricity is too expensive, so you have to hang your clothes out. But you wash your clothes in tubs. And I tried that one time. And I said, I can surely afford to pay somebody to do this. So I hired Madeline right here, and she did my laundry once a week in tubs. And then we hung it out to dry, or she did. Then cooking was another problem, and shopping. Because in Ouagadougou, you don't go to a supermarket. They don't have them. You have to go all over town to find what you want. You have to bargain for everything you want to buy. I don't speak French. So it was a problem. You also have to be very careful about hygiene. When you cook food, produce, you need to soak it in bleach, a bleach combination. I thought I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to poison myself with bleach. So I hired Dauda. And Dauda was a trained chef. And he actually was the chef for the Swedish ambassador. And I was his part-time job. He'd come on the weekends. He was also cute, don't you think? And he and I became good buddies. He's my friend on Facebook. He didn't speak any English either. I would use Google Translate on my laptop a lot. So anyway, Dauda came once a week and cooked, and he was an excellent cook. Also, another problem was power cuts. They cut the power all the time. And they do it especially when it's really, really hot, which is most of the time. And well, they cut it to save energy. And then this is the generator that was in my courtyard, which sounded a bit like a jet plane taking off. And it didn't always work, and sometimes it was out of gas. But I was a godsend because it could get really hot. So, and another thing that was a problem was the internet. It's not reliable at all. They don't have high-speed internet landlines. So what you did was you buy this little thing called an Airtel key, and you buy minutes on it, and you plug it into your computer, and you pray to God it works. And a lot of times it works, but a lot of times it's really, really slow. And then you run out of minutes when you're in the middle of something. It can be very frustrating. So all of this I learned to live with and keep my mouth shut and smile and say, c'est la vie. Or as my friends say, TIA, this is Africa. So another thing that was real frustration was getting around in Ouagadougou, transportation. I was telling, I think, Mei Li, there are no street names. Only a few streets have street names. Or if they have names, nobody knows what the name is. I never knew my address. I would ask and nobody knew. It didn't matter. You know, you also don't have street signs, obviously, if you don't have street names. So trying to get anywhere was kind of a problem. They would go by landmarks. Oh, it's near the statue of, if you didn't know where that was. And if you didn't speak French, you're kind of screwed. So I thought about getting a moto. You see this guy here? They're everywhere in Ouagadougou. This congested with motos. But the problem is, there's no licensing laws for motos. People, if they can get the thing started and make it move, they can drive it. And it's really dangerous. So when I said I might get a moto, everybody that met me said, don't do that, it's really dangerous. So I didn't get a moto. And then the green taxis are everywhere, right here. They're real dilapidated, they're not in very good shape. And when you get in a taxi, other people will get in with you. So you never get the taxi by yourself. And of course the drivers speak French and there's no street names. So how am I going to take a taxi? So I did find one guy that spoke a little English. He taught himself with a dictionary. He had a little American flag stuck in his car. And he gave me his number, I gave him my number, and once or twice I used him. But I found myself waiting for rides all the time. It was really frustrating. So then I decided, well, let's try this approach. This approach. I got a bicycle. Then, okay, I'll bicycle. I'll be healthy. I could bicycle from my house to the university. Now, you might ask, why didn't you walk? Well, there are no sidewalks. It's extremely dusty, and there's traffic everywhere. I really wanted to live, so I didn't want to walk. So I got this bicycle, and it worked for a little while. But the roads are really bumpy, and they're full of rocks. And I hit a rock one day and fell off the bicycle. And I thought, okay, I want to survive my experience. I'm getting rid of the bicycle. So I got rid of the bicycle. I finally rented a car, and that was really expensive. So then I bought a car. And that was my car. That was my little Mazda. I drove all over in it. And people would be amazed. I would just go anywhere. I didn't like to go outside of Ouagadougou, though, because there were checkpoints and they only spoke French, and I was afraid I might get arrested. So I didn't do that. So anyway, that was a big challenge. Once I got the car, I was much happier. I had freedom again. So now, I want to talk about their diversity, and I know this is going long, I'm going to try and shorten it, but it's very diverse. There's a lot of ethnic groups in Burkina Faso. The largest ethnic group is the Mosi people, and that's about 40% of the population. The rest of the 60% is made up of about 60 different ethnic groups. Now, we're talking the size of Colorado. So if this is the diversity in ethnicity, in tribes, think of the diversity in language. So in Burkina Faso, there's approximately 70 languages in a country the size of Colorado. Now, French is the official language. That's what's used in government and in education. But if you don't go to school, if you live in the rural area, you probably don't speak French either. So I never learned any More, that's the main language, other than Barca Barca, and that's thank you. Thank you. So that's all I know in More. These are some other ethnic languages that are considered official. English is taught in the public schools. It's taught for 7 years, but it's a lot like our foreign language in this country. Nobody can speak it. They take all this language and they can't speak it. They don't get any opportunity to practice it, and the way it's taught is not fun. And I'll get into that in a minute. So why is English important to our country to teach over there? Well, why would anybody want to learn English? Because English is the language of opportunity. It's an international language. If you want to further yourself, you learn English. And where I taught at the American Language Center, it was night classes for professional people. I had a physicist, I had a meteorologist in my class. I died and went to heaven. I had tiny, tiny classes with really motivated students. So, and I had smart boards. But because this language center had been part of the American government's diplomacy efforts and had been in the embassy, but they privatized it after the assassinations in Benghazi. They thought it was a security risk. There were several of these around Africa. They privatized all of them because the State Department said they're a security risk. So, all right. I want to talk briefly about religion. I have never been in a country where differences in religion were so highly tolerated. The country is 60% Islam, and I realize that doesn't even add up to 100%, so I don't know where I got those figures. It doesn't that. Ivan? Help me out out of here. Anyway, in Bonnie's math, anyhow, it's 60% Islam. It's pretty accurate. I don't know about the rest, okay? But there's a lot of traditional religions that are really, animism is the biggest one, and that's kind of a faith in your ancestors. I don't even know how to explain that. And then 17% Roman Catholic, 3% Protestant. So here's the thing. They really respect other people's beliefs. The Muslims in that country are the kindest people. And Abu Bakr, right here, was a Muslim. He invited me to his house on Tabaski, which is a huge Muslim holiday. And we ended up on the steps of a church later that day. I was trying to find this church. I asked him if he'd give me a ride. And so we ended up, here's this Muslim surrounded by 2 Christians with their arms around him on the steps of a Christian church. This to me is so symbolic of the way they treat religion in that country. I've never been so happy to be in a place where religion is respected and honored, and your beliefs are not disrespected by anybody. So, and I asked my students about that, and they said, "Oh, Bonnie, that's because we've all intermarried." These Christians are in our Muslim families, and so anyway, the legacy of French colonization. Now this gets to the serious part. The French practiced direct rule when they were colonizing countries. That basically means they wanted Africans to assimilate and become Europeans. They didn't want to honor their ethnic beliefs, their practices. They wanted to dominate them, and they did a pretty darn good job. They have centralized administrations, policies of assimilation. They didn't let African rulers lead. Before they were colonized, it was tribal rule. And kingdoms, African kingdoms with chiefs. And the French didn't let them have any kind of important role, as opposed to the British, who did let them they had indirect rule. They let the chiefs make some decisions. So also they had a divide and rule policy. Basically, they often tried to pit one kingdom against another as a way of control. So what's that legacy like? That means there's a real lack of leadership in Burkina Faso. Nobody learned how to lead and how to govern for the whole time it was a French colony. The government is a huge bureaucracy, as the French government is. I'm sorry, if I'm offending anybody that really likes the French, forgive me. They did this country no favors. They have a national curriculum in education, which is very much a French model, and national testing. There are 3 major tests that students must pass to move on. And it's all standardized. So the way they teach, their curriculum focuses on vocational studies. It relies on rote memorization. It ignores critical thinking and problem solving. That just doesn't exist in the curriculum. And the teacher is seen as the sage on the stage. And the sage on the stage is going to tell you what you need to know, and you're going to take notes and memorize it and pass the test. It's not a good way to educate, not a way to build leaders. So how's the state of education? Very low literacy rates, as I mentioned earlier. The educational system is totally inadequate to meet the challenges of a country that in 2018 is still not developed. They have a very high unemployment rate. Students do go to high school, and they do graduate and go on to one of the 2 universities in the entire country, but they don't seem to be able to pull themselves out of their problems in self-employment and find solutions. Everybody's waiting for a handout. Everybody's waiting for the government to solve their problems because they don't know how to solve their problems. They've been kept from learning how to do that. They're grossly inadequate in resources. I traveled around the country to 13 regional capitals and did teacher training. And every teacher I talked to told me the size of their classes are mind-boggling. These classrooms are not designed to hold 70 students, and that's the average size of one classroom. I met one student in Bobo de Lils that had 140 students in his class. There aren't even seats for 140 students. So it's just mind-boggling. They have huge overcrowded classrooms, and they have rare to non-existent teacher training. Most of the teachers in Burkina Faso have never taken an education class. They have no clue. They get out of college, they need a job, they get a job as a teacher. Here's their classroom, they have no books, they have no resources, and they have no training. So it's really frustrating. I wanted to show you this picture that a friend of mine from Africa sent me. This is a teacher in Ghana. He's the IT teacher. You know what he's doing there? He's using multiple colored chalk to draw on the chalkboard the Windows processing system because they have no computers. And he's drawing that, and his students are here are copying it because the national test in Ghana requires them to know this. And they have to pass that test to move on to high school. So this is how he teaches IT. This is really a good example of how bad the education system is. I know it's Ghana, but it's just as bad in Burkina. So, all right. So, I want to just show you some quick pictures of where I taught. These are 2 classes I taught at the American Language Center. Then I worked with the English Access Club. I went as a visiting, one of the teachers invited me. That's an after-school program for disadvantaged youth, which is most of the youth in Burkina. And we played games. We learned English by playing games. They loved it. I keep hitting that. These are 2 English clubs. That's really unique to Africa. In the English language, these students want to learn English so bad, and they want to learn it and have fun learning it, so they create these clubs that meet maybe once a month, maybe twice a month at the universities and the public schools, where they meet and they speak English. And they're thrilled if they get a movie to watch in English, which I bought them some. This was the Access program. I did teacher training for the Access teachers. All of these teachers worked with me at the American Language Center, and they also taught in the Access program. And that was great fun. And then I went around the country to 13 regional capitals with a representative from the embassy through the Ministry of Education, and we did teacher training. We did curriculum development, syllabus design. I couldn't find all the pictures, but I found 6 of them. So these are 6 different cities I was in, training these teachers. We had a lot of fun, made many new Facebook friends. And I still talk to these people on Facebook. So that was that. Now, politics, and I'm going to hurry up because I know we're running out of time. This is really a big problem in Africa and in Burkina Faso. Since 1966, they have had 10 coup attempts. Yeah. Now, what happened in '83 was that Thomas Sankara was involved in a coup, and he's the one that became the president. He's the one that changed the name of the country. He was well respected and loved in Burkina Faso. He's a hero in Africa. They call him the Che Guevara of Africa. He got assassinated by Blaise Compaoré, who was his best friend and second in command. And Blaise, it hasn't been proven, but it's widely accepted that he was responsible for the assassination of Sankara, and the French government was involved in that. Blaise ruled for 27 years, till 2014. Now that's the year I went to Burkina Faso. So I was there when this happened. And there was a coup attempt in 2015. Lasted 1 day. There was another coup attempt that they squelched in 2016. I was there from 2014 to 2016. So let me just show you this. There was a popular uprising in 2014 because Compaoré, the president, that had been president for 27 years, wanted to extend his rule. He wanted to amend the Constitution so he could serve 3 more 5-year terms. And the public said, not only no, hell no. You're not going to serve. We don't want the Constitution. We want you gone. He'd done nothing to develop the country except make himself and his family richer. So they had a huge demonstration. More than 1,000 people showed up in Ouagadougou to march. Every teacher I knew at the American Language Center was in that march. They actually asked me, did you go, Bonnie? I said, don't you think I would have stuck out like a sore thumb? No, the embassy told me to stay home. And the women went and marched. That was on a Tuesday. The Parliament was supposed to meet Thursday to vote on this, and they wanted them to call it off. Blaise Compaoré wouldn't call it off. So on Thursday, this happened. They stormed the Parliament, the public did, mainly young men from the country, burnt the Parliament building. They went next door and burnt the hotel where the parliamentarians were staying. They took control of a radio station. And the government responded by closing the airport and closing the borders. And I was in my house going, oh, I don't think I can get out of this country if I want to. And that lasted about a day. Compaoré said, oh, well, I'm still president. Okay, we won't vote on this, but I'm still president. And the public said, we don't want you as president anymore. And he fled the country on Friday. And he fled to Cote d'Ivoire, and he took most of the treasury with him. And there's a strong belief that the French helped him do it. Can you see I'm not a fan of the French? So by Friday, that's what the Parliament building looked like. And it still looks like that. When I left the country in 2016, they hadn't fixed it. I think they wanted it as a reminder. So it still looks like that. Now, let's get back to my point. Sorry. Sharing my gifts, finding my purpose. Here's the thing. I have to look at my notes because I don't want to screw this up. My experience had such an effect on me that it was so life-changing for me that I partnered with another Burkina Faso educator. And actually, Draman is right now at Columbia University as a Fulbright scholar working on his master's in education. He and I are partners. We formed a nonprofit organization. It's called The Bridge, because we want to bridge the gap from where the country is to where it needs to be. And what we want to do is we want to make a difference in education. So we wrote a vision statement, we wrote a mission statement. I won't take time to read it, but basically we want to help the country develop an educational system that will train leaders, problem solvers, innovators who can fix these problems, take leadership, and get away from the legacy of French colonial rule. We have 5 goals, and I'll quickly put them here. And I'll just highlight that we really want to provide and support professional development for teachers. We really want to assist with K through 12 curriculum development and syllabus design. And we want to provide supplemental resources because they don't have any. And we want to offer supplemental programs for students that'll build leaders and entrepreneurs. And we want to perform community outreach because in this literacy rate, women's literacy is extremely low. Parents will pull their kids out of school, their daughters out of school if they're not making good grades because they think they need to go to work and help the family. And we all know women can make a difference when they're educated. So this is what we want to do, and all of it centers around critical thinking, problem solving, ethnic and gender sensitivity, building leaders and changing things. And that's our goal. So my greatest desire and dream for myself is that I can do this kind of work full time. I want to do this, what I want to devote the rest of my life to. When I finished my fellowship in Burkina Faso, we had to file a final report with the State Department. And one of the questions was, what did you learn from your experience as a fellow? And you know what I wrote? I wrote, I learned I'm not ready to retire and play golf. I am ready to make a difference. I'm not done yet. And I am not done yet. So, and I'm a force to be reckoned with when I get fired up. So, what I want to tell you is, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. And I found great meaning and great joy working in West Africa using my gifts. My gifts of inspiring others, my gifts of leading others, my gift of diplomacy, my gift for teaching, my gift for curriculum development, and my gift for public speaking. So, I want to use that gift. I want to continue to give it away, and my dream and my hope for you is that you find the joy I felt when I was using my gifts to benefit others, that you experience that kind of joy with whatever your gifts are, and that you go on and share it with others. That's my greatest hope and wish for you, and that's what I hope you get from today's talk. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry it was so long.
So we have a few minutes for questions if there's anyone in the room who would like to ask a question of either presenter.
No questions? You got it all figured out?
I did. Ivan, I think I misheard a detail, but I wanted to just clarify. When you were in that unfortunate situation where you were sitting at a table with somebody who said, I wish I didn't know this about you, God knows. Did you say that was during an inclusion meeting where you were drafting the inclusion statement? Got it. Okay. That's very interesting.
It was. So my hope, though, is that statement that has been drafted, and I think they did a wonderful job of trying to keep people happy. I would never want to be on that committee because I feel like they changed those words enough to get people to be willing to accept it by saying free to be fully known, and yet maybe it's even more powerful if we hold people's feet to the fire and say, in order to be fully known, you're going to have to fully know.
Yeah.
And so hopefully more conversations where we get a chance to know each other. And I was going to say, and I probably shouldn't say this, it'll probably get me in trouble, but I'm good at that. What I'm seeing come out of that philosophy of inclusion, the most concrete thing I've seen come out of that is implicit bias training. which is just another, in my mind, bureaucratic thing being put in so that we can say we're doing it. I want more informal conversations where we actually talk to each other and get to know each other.
Like this?
Yes, yes. Right.
Just want to make a comment on that same topic. I was at a training. I think it was the one on gender identities training, and a similar comment was made by one of the participants, and just said, "I don't need to know this about everybody. I don't want to know about everything about everybody, and I don't need to know this," and said quite innocently. And someone else, made the comment, "Yeah, but if you don't know this about this person, then you don't really know the person." And she, by the end of the conversation, she was really thinking about it. And I think that's the kind of conversation that we do want to have. And sometimes those trainings give us a venue to have those personal conversations and get those things out and actually process those things. And so I'm glad they're doing it, even though it's not the be all and end all. I'm glad, it could be that'll spark those very conversations. And I think people just don't realize, I think in her mind, she was like, you can have your private life, I'm gonna have my private life, I don't need to get into your business. That was her perspective. But when she thought about it in another way, she was really thinking by the time we left the room. Anyway, it was great. And one of the things I guess I wanted to bring up was, too, with your talk, Ivan, I already mentioned to you, but just to say that that background, that environment that you grew up in is probably in the United States the most conservative, the most traditional lifestyle and values, and it was probably your biggest challenge, to break out of that and to go against that.
And yet it's a crucial part of who I am
Absolutely.
Also, and I embrace it.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
something I run from.
Right.
Yeah.
But how challenging more,
Little mind game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated both of your talks so much.
Well, I'm thinking of being in Nebraska, in this small town of 420. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that's even been to Africa.
I'm sure.
And my reunion's coming up, and I can hardly wait to hear the questions I'm going to get. Very, very conservative, yeah.
Well, I would venture to guess that if you wanted to reach out to Ivan or Bonnie after today and get to know them even better, to speak to your point, Ivan, I'm sure they'd be willing. So please know that they're here on campus. So can we give them one more round of applause? One before you go take more snacks. But two, our final What Matters to Me talk this semester will be on Thursday, April 5th at noon. And our two speakers will be Niro Spaditari from the chair, he's the chair of social behavior sciences, and will be speaking about engaged scholarship, why it matters to me. And then William Foster, the English instructor and service learning coordinator, will be talking about when students go beyond checking the boxes. Very cool. All right. Thank you for coming.
Nice to meet you.